States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Who's up first? Mr. Portier, if you wouldn't mind closing the door in the back. Never mind.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commission. I'm Devin Schmidt, the Finance Director for the City of St. Pete Beach. My phone isn't working. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Is that better?
No.
Any bell? There we go. Okay. I guess it's just positioning. So today we are here for our proposed preliminary budget workshop number 4. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about and take the commission through what we're calling sort of the story of ad valorem taxes. And so where does that funding come from? Who pays for it? I think it's important to note that we'll be including this in every one of our budget cycles moving forward. I think it's also important for us to note that our current budget is balanced on our current millage rate. And then we'll also spend some time this afternoon looking at any of the changes that we've incorporated since the last time we met, as well as the recommendation that we received on Friday from the Finance Budget Review Committee. So to kick things off, we're going to, as I mentioned, kind of start with a global picture and then drill down into this detail of this presentation, looking at our ad valorem taxes. But to start, we thought it might be nice to provide an example of how much property taxes stays local within our St. Pete Beach community. So if the taxable value of this home is $500,000, the commission can see here that 20% of that, or 20 cents on every dollar, stays within St. Pete Beach. Concurrently, on the other side of that, 80% of that goes to, or $6,200 goes to schools, county EMS, and other districts. At the last meeting, we did get a question from the Finance Budget Review Committee about what those other districts are. So those are the Pinellas County Planning Council, the Juvenile Welfare Board, and the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And when we're looking at those different areas, the largest piece of that 80% goes out to our schools at a 5.8 mil, and then the county at 5.6, and then our EMS and our other districts together is about 1.8 of that millage. So just wanted to clarify that when we're looking at how the ad valorem taxes come into our city and what that looks like. So looking at this at kind of the highest level, if we zoomed out and looked at what makes up our ad valorem taxes, so 30% are homestead, or 4.7 million. 11 million of that is 70% are considered non-homestead if we're looking at what the types of properties are utilized. So in order for a property to be considered homestead, it would have to be that you lived at that property on January 1st, and that you, if you were to claim that exemption, you could not have rented it for more than 30 days. So that's by definition what we're looking at for when we're looking at homestead. So if we were to take and look at this percentage of tax distribution for residents versus commercial, you can see that 72%, or 11.3 million, is our residential. 3.7 million, or 24%, is our commercial, and then we have an area that's considered this both residential and mixed. So that could be something as simple as it's a vertical mixed use, where on the bottom you might have some residential units, and on the top you have some family residents living in that area. So then when we're looking at our homesteaded properties, you can see here that when we're looking at our population of St. Pete Beach, the people who live here year-round live in single-family homes. That's the largest portion at 70%. Then in our condominiums, we have our 20%, and then you can see those other portions when we're looking at the duplex, triplex, planned unit development, or single-family more than one unit parcel. Looking at our non-homestead, you can see here that there's 25% is family, single-family homes. Condominiums is 26%, and then we have hotel motels at 19% and other. So in other, there's over a dozen categories when you're looking at those different parcel types, but that could be anything from timeshares to hotels and motels that are 49 units or less, apartments from 5 to 9 units, vacant residential, that are all in that non-homestead. So when we're looking at this on another kind of view, when we're looking at just simply those assessed valuations, you can see that commercial, so in those different categories, we have the property use type, and then we have whether or not it's homestead, yes or no, and then what that assessed value is for each one of those. So you can see the largest there is condo, no, and then we have residential, no, residential, yes, and commercial are kind of those top bigger buckets. And then this is just another way to look at that by way of a pie chart, so you can see those percentages of the numbers we just looked at. We know that the City Commission would like to see, how do we compare to our other communities? So these are all of the cities within our Pinellas County. So you can see from total millage all the way down to the lowest. So we filtered this by largest total millage down to the least amount there, and you can see where St. Pete Beach fits within the mix of each one of those different cities and taxing districts within Pinellas County. So when we're looking at the options from Pinellas County about what we're able to do as a city, the county provides a calculate a maximum millage levy for the city to consider every year. And so you can see here, I think it was Colonel Greger mentioned that rollback rate, you go to Walmart and you see a rollback rate and you expect it to be less. Well, the reason why ours is not lower is that this has really happened since the first time since 2008. And the reason for that has to do with that diminished value of our building structure for all the properties that were damaged by the hurricane. So our rollback rate is actually higher than what our current millage rate is today. So I just want to take a moment to explain that. Okay, so then we looked at, or wanted to provide the commission some property analysis. So if we're looking at what our current rate is versus our other rates and our average annual impact by parcel type, first you can see those totaled numbers is looking at both. So homestead, yes and no. And then what those current millages that's listed in the yellow column there. And what it would be if we looked at the rollback rate on an annual basis, if we looked at the majority vote max on an annual basis, and if we looked at our 2/3 vote max on an annual basis, and what the difference is between what's currently being paid versus what would be paid on an annual basis. So I think the biggest piece to highlight here on this slide, that if you're non-homestead, you're going to pay more in property taxes. That's just what it looks like. But if we were to look at a residential homesteaded property, you can see here that it would be $16 for the current versus rollback rate on an annual basis, $98 for the current versus majority, and then $287 for the current versus the max. So another way to look at this as well is when you're looking at all of the property data that exists within St. Pete Beach, we looked at each one of these different categories. What would be the lowest that somebody would pay versus what would be the highest that somebody would pay based on what their homestead status is, but then also what their property type is. So is it commercial, is it condo, is it residential non-homestead, and is it residential homestead? So you can see different variations between literally the lowest amount and the highest amount that could happen. So then when we're looking at how does the millage articulate and calculate into a revenue for the city of St. Pete Beach? So when we're looking at these different areas, that you can see the total delta between the current rate and the rolled back rate would accumulate approximately $140,000 more for the city of St. Pete Beach. If you look at the majority vote max rate between what our current rate is, it would equate to about $860,000 annually for the city of St. Pete Beach. And then if you look at the 2/3 vote max millage rate, that would equate to about 2.5 million on an annual basis in revenues for the city of St. Pete Beach.
Devin, I'm sorry if you go back one slide.
Sure.
So I appreciate this is your first year doing our budget. And I hate to compare one person versus how the last person did it. And what I notice here is that you have what it's currently at, what it looks like if we increase it a little bit, a medium bit, and a large bit. What is missing from this slide is going the other direction, right? What happens if we lower the rate? Because that is also an option that the commission has.
Sure. And so when we looked at that rolled back rate, that is the information that we received back from Pinellas County that was saying because of where we're at today as a municipality and because of the loss that we had, that would be that rollback rate. So
Okay.
staying with our current rate is actually the cheapest. I mean, we could certainly look and see if we could reduce that further. But that's kind of the interesting piece about that rolled back rate for this year.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. So then, as we've been continuing to try to look at the long-term forecasts in our financial picture, we wanted to provide the commission and the community what 10 years could look like if we were to put 50% into a resiliency fund and if we were to put 50% into CIP, looking at the majority vote max as well as the 2/3 vote max millage. So those were two areas that you can see. After 10 years, we'd have 8.5 million between those two funds at the majority vote max, and we would have 25.2 million at the 2/3 vote max millage. So then we were working with our Public Services Director, Camden Mills, to determine what additional projects could we accomplish if we had an additional $8.5 million in revenues. So you can see here that we have 3 projects under that majority vote max. So storm system cleaning and inspection, shoreline protection improvements, and the Don Cesar boat ramp project. And then what would it look like if it was 2/3 vote max millage or that 25.2 million over the next 10 years? So that includes 3 additional projects as the Don Cesar Basin 3 resiliency adaptation, the Bella Vista Basin 1 resiliency adaptation, and the Bella Vista Basin 2 resiliency adaptation for a total of 24.5. So with the discussion with the Finance Budget Review Committee, we wanted to show the recommendation that they looked at a rolled back rate of 3.1189, which would generate 70,000 into the resiliency fund and 70,000 into the CIP. Again, I think it's important to note that staff has presented a balanced budget with the operations. So what we're looking for is that we have a deadline of July 29th to receive what this commission would like for us to provide as our millage for the fiscal year. So with that, I can pause or I can continue through the changes of the budget. It's certainly up to the body of how you'd like me to proceed.
Well, let's have a pause here and have a conversation about our options
Okay.
before we look at how we spend the money, before we decide how much money we have.
Okay.
So, just help me understand this one more time.
Okay.
Because maybe I'm missing something. Our current millage rate, the 3 options that we have above the current all seem like increases to me. Okay. So our options are stay where we are at 3.09, correct?
Correct.
Raise it a little bit to 3.11, raise it to 3.25, or raise it to 3.58.
Correct.
Okay.
So Mayor, let me just clarify, just conferred with the city attorney. So according to Florida statute, you can reduce your taxes any amount. What it does is it creates a new baseline for any future rollback or majority vote max, 2/3 max. So you create a new ceiling that you could raise taxes if you roll back lower than the I guess lower than the current millage this year.
Right.
It is an anomaly that's happening on the rollback that we would normally get reported from the county. The county does not do calculations for us that show additional reductions, but we could do the math if that's the pleasure of the commission. And we would need to come back to you with a new operating budget proposal, because the operating budget that we have in front of you is assuming option A right now.
Okay. So the current budget as it's drafted is a balanced budget under option A, which is to maintain the millage rate where it is at today.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Commissioner Woznicki?
Just a couple of questions. Besides the millage, what else are we looking at as a city, whether bonds, special assessments for projects, because I know that the assessments would have to be specific, or bonds. Is this being entertained, and has it been proposed anywhere on how we can complete some of the CIP projects, or anything specific to a district, let's say, to complete? I know we've kind of talked about it for the Don Cesar in our resiliency meetings, but, I don't know if any of you have thought about that, like that would be another way of improving our budget.
So we've had very preliminary discussions and calculations on an assessment specific to the Don Cesar neighborhood, that we are introducing those conversations with that neighborhood. You've been at those meetings. It's in its infancy stages. It would involve an assessment of only those property owners around the specific resiliency projects that are impacting that neighborhood. Those projects are also included in the citywide resiliency plan. So we're looking at sort of peeling that onion back, and if there's any appetite for neighborhoods to take on those resiliency projects on their own. We also are doing rate studies right now on stormwater and wastewater, which are supposed to be self-sufficient enterprise funds that are being funded, or I'll say subsidized, by the ad valorem general fund tax at the moment. Those would generate revenue, but again, those are fee-based, and so the users are residents and commercial users. So it doesn't result in a reduction in costs, let me say, to the end user. That's sort of where we're at, as well as looking for grants and trying to leverage as much money as we can to see where we can put ourselves in a matching situation, especially in the hazard mitigation space. And there are larger concept ideas that would take a lot of vetting, but there are some cities that have created special assessment districts around shoreline preservation. So you take seawall protection as a city, not as sort of individual property owners. Those are multi-year projects because they involve easement challenges and agreement by essentially everyone who lives with a seawall, as well as the city seawall. So we're having those conversations, but some of those are just multi-year strategies that take, quite a bit of time to put in place.
Right. And I mean, I mention it because, you look at the projections that you have, just saying one of them, I think it was 12 million for resiliency, and I think it was another, let's just say another 12 for CIPs in 10 years, right? Is that what the slide was? So, and we see some of the cost of one project, which in a lot of cases is 12 million, right? So, raising it a little bit, even a lot, right? Even if we did max, wouldn't cover a lot of projects. If you look at your projections, right? And I think it was the 2/3 max, right? That you had it with the 12 No, it wasn't that one. So 25 million, basically, for the two-thirds, max. And so in 10 years, we would accumulate that money. And I don't know if you have a number of total CIPs out there that we're trying to accomplish, but it would basically mean nothing can get done.
I mean, we've shown you this a few months back. I mean, we're in the hundreds of millions of dollars in needs.
Right.
However, there's no silver bullet here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at, this is one avenue. There's grants, there's impact fees. There are, and when you have matching dollars, you leverage grant money much more effectively than when you don't have matching dollars. So
this
we're
could
not
help
going
with
to
that.
solve our way out of this with ad valorem. We're not going to solve our way out of this with grants, but we can solve our way out of it by taking it, I'll say, smaller chunks, and you just keep working at it, and it is going to, it's essentially a multi-decade
Right.
solution that you're just working your way through it.
Right.
And
Do we know,
as much as you can.
definitely, do we know what the highest millage rate for the city was ever, or like historically? Does anybody know?
I do not.
I don't, but I could find out.
Because, I mean, it'd be interesting to know that if we had been reducing it, when there's so many costs, so many things that we haven't been upkeeping that we've noticed more so now because of the hurricanes, stormwater, sewer, reclaimed water, a lot of things that are kind of falling apart. And we kind of toot our horn saying, okay, we reduced the millage rate. Oh, well, that's great, but now we don't have any money, to continue repairing. So, I wonder, because you saw the history of all the other municipalities. I think one was 3.5, or sorry, not one. Some of them are way higher. I don't know if it was Treasure Island, I think was closest in size, but yet smaller than us. We're not budgeting what we truly need for this city to run, is kind of like what I see, that we're barely making it through. So anyways. Oh, and one other thing, in the one of the assessed values, you had a one of showing different assessed values, like how much it would cost. I wish I can move it. Yeah, that one right there. On the average taxable value, because it's hard to see the comparison. I don't know if I'm seeing this correctly or not, because let's say, look at the residential. You have the ones that are the no, 938, 548, and then the yes, 581, 365. And when as you're saying the presentation, you mentioned how definitely we know that the non-homestead it would be more, but they're not the same value. So we're not. It's like we're looking at that number 464 and 287, and it's a big difference in that average taxable value. But when you look at the current and the max, like the difference in what someone's going to pay on a year-to-year basis, it's not that much different. If you see it that way, because we're not comparing the same average taxable value, like they're not both 581. To know the true difference between a homestead and non-homestead property at that same value, it would just be the same then, right? Because it's the same number, I'm assuming.
So
I guess to my point is that it's just that the non-exempt is going to pay more regardless. Is that what we're trying to say?
correct.
Yep.
Yep. So
If you're non-exempt, if you're non-homesteaded or homesteaded and your home was both 581, then you're multiplying it with the same millage, right? So it should be the same, 287. Am I right on that or not? Because in my mind, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, because once a property becomes homestead, then there's an exemption to it, so the total assessed value comes down. So that's the difference there of the two, looking at it homestead versus non-homestead. You're going to have a higher rate because that exemption hasn't been applied to the taxable value of the property.
Okay.
And then I believe you get your 3% cap too, correct?
Right.
Correct.
So,
And would it be
so then every year it stays down, so.
Yeah.
that's-
But it's not too far apart. Would it be? Because, I mean, that one's 938, and that's 581, and you're talking 464 and 287. That's not a huge difference there for two different average taxable values. anyways, just, when I looked at that slide, it's hard for me to, if you're looking at whether you're, homesteaded or not, it's hard to see.
Sure. And the reason why those average taxable values is that is taking that total taxable value, dividing it by how many numbers of parcels, just to come up with that average taxable value. So that's where the difference is, but I could see how it could be easier to look at it on an apples to apples comparison of the same dollar amount.
Right. I mean, if you just look at the rollback, 25 versus 16, it's not a big difference.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Thank you. So if we kept the current millage, going back to the slide where it said what we could accomplish, how is that going to impact us? Is that adversely, or is that just keeping with what we already have projected in the CIP?
That would be the budget
Status
that's been
quo,
presented
just-
to you. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
So we do need to make a decision on this, which means we have to hear from all of you today. Because our deadline is the 29th. If we want to make any changes, if we don't make any changes, I'm going to have to assume that your silence means we're keeping everything the same. So one way or the other, we need to hear from every commissioner at this point today.
Well, I'd like to feel confident that in regards to our budget, that we have really got that pretty tight, that we don't have any excess in that, because that would be my concern too. I mean, if we're going to be looking at doing it, potentially doing an increase, what cuts are we doing internally as well? It kind of goes both ways. I mean, I'm concerned about that. I want to feel confident that we have done our best at keeping the priority projects priority, and also back to which projects might be, or which divisions or departments are supersede other departments and their needs. I'm concerned about that. But as far as we have a big undertaking, we're not in the same financials we were, a year ago, obviously. And we're not in the same financial situation we thought we were 2 years ago. So we have some big items to accomplish and take care of, especially in the capital improvement with infrastructure. And there's big concerns there. And I think every penny that we can save internally as well helps the overall picture.
Now, this is just for capital and resiliency, right? Whatever goes over? Okay.
So the way we've presented it, because I do believe if there were ever to be an ad valorem increase to this commission, I would recommend create some guardrails. And to the extent we can keep operations as flat as possible going forward, or tracking inflation, because I think I heard from this commission when I was hired that, the organization needed to be rebuilt. There was a desire to pay at market rate, and you spent a lot of effort investing in that. And I think we've arrived at a baseline that we can work from, and generally still skinny but whole, and every day working on efficiencies to find ways to use technology and innovation to keep us at personnel levels that we are at. With that being said, the guardrails we're proposing here are that you have a comp plan that provides a policy that 50% of any millage rate increase goes into the resiliency fund. That fund balance is currently zero. We have created that fund in our new financial system. And so the goal would be that's the first guardrail. The second guardrail we're building in the new system is that every project will have a capital program number. And once that money's allocated, if you choose to put it in CIP, so you could choose to put all of it in resiliency. It's just your minimum by policy right now in the comp plan is 50%. But we're creating project numbers so that you don't lose sight of when you do start to fund a project, even if it doesn't get started, that fund balance stays the same until the project's able to be funded or able to be started, and then the funds are drawn down by that project number. And if that money were to be moved into a different project or into different operations, that would take an action by the commission. So that's what I'm trying to set up internally, so that even I would not have the authority to say, oh, move 50,000 out of that project over here to finish it. I would have to come back to you and tell you, this project's over budget, I need money, we're going to have to cut this project now to do it, so that there's more transparency, so you all know exactly where your money's sitting and when you can expect those projects to be fully funded.
I mean, another question on the millage, just so that not only myself, but for people listening, we are only talking about the millage of the city, right? So if Pinellas County or the school board or any of those other entities could be talking right now, just like we are, to raise millage, then, you know, because people will think, oh, it's only $19, but it could possibly be more, depending on what everybody else does.
Correct.
And do we have a feel for that? Does anybody know what's going on? Like, because I'm sure, I mean, county-wise, they were hit too. I mean, I'm sure they had infrastructure issues and projects, CIPs, and God knows what other things on the list that will impact every homeowner as well.
I'm not aware of the schools. My last meeting, regional meeting, I was under the impression the county was not raising their millage.
But they got hit $9 million last week, so we don't know, right? I mean, it could happen.
It
right?
could. There's still time.
$9 million just for Pinellas County is what I'm saying, not statewide. Sorry, I knew you were going to say something.
Commissioner Robinson, had you finished your thoughts?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel two ways about this, right? So on the one hand, you know, as much as the city's expenses have increased because of the hurricanes, so have so many of the residents. You know, I know that we've all heard a lot of stories about people who can't retire, had to come out of retirement, are pushing retirement off another 10 years because of the financial position they've personally been put in because of the hurricane. And so it seems punitive or kind of like what I would call the typical bad rap that government gets, that, you know, I don't care what your situation is, we want to do more stuff, so we want more of your money, right? And I think we need to be very cognizant of that. And you know, I think it is our job to keep things reined in and as efficient as possible and as streamlined as possible, and, you know, really manage costs, like Commissioner Robinson said. You know, I think we need to be very aware of what's being spent in what departments, how is it being spent, are we spending money on things that we really need? I also see the argument that, you know, it's not that much money per person. We have a lot of projects, we have a lot of infrastructure needs. And so for me personally, between our options that we are faced with today, I'm in favor of either our current millage or the rolled back rate. I'm not in favor of going above the rolled back rate. I think that, you know, historically over the last 5 to 15 years of the city of St. Pete Beach, there's been, you know, not the same level of transparency with the budget that we have right now, and not the same amount of assurance that things will get spent the way they're supposed to get spent. But I think we'd all like to see that performance happen over the course of a year before we give away a bunch of all of our neighbors' money to promises that we have not yet seen delivered. I'm completely confident that they will be delivered, but I think we'd all like to see it before we all throw a bunch of more money into the kitty. So I would be in favor of either the current millage or the rolled back rate.
Thank you, Commissioner. Devin, I have a question. So on your slide, going 1 or 2 back here, one more. Okay, so looking at that, let's say that very last option, the 2/3, so that's 2.5 million above our current amount to the city budget.
Correct.
What is the total? So is that 20% of the whole? So if the city gets 20% of the ad valorem taxes, property taxes, So does that mean that the actual contribution is $12.5 million with the county getting 10 million, or is it that's just the total?
That's just the total
Okay.
millage for the city.
And do you have any data on what the homestead versus non-homestead numbers look like before the previous year?
I don't. I could certainly get that information.
Okay. I have a hunch, based on data, that the 700 or 800 homes that have been sold in the last year after the hurricane were sold to people that did not homestead or haven't homesteaded yet, which might skew those numbers. Because we have roughly 7,500 registered voters in the city, and if only 3,000 homes out of the 8,000, 9,000 homes were actually homesteaded, that those numbers wouldn't add up. And so there's a very good chance that those numbers looked significantly different a year ago versus today. And so I just want to make sure that we're looking at, apples to apples, because if there was something like a hurricane that caused 800-900 homes to be sold, that all had a homestead reset or a property tax reset, which is what we've seen in about 75-80% of the cases, that the actual tax basis was significantly reset, some of them as high as 200% and 300%. So I think, and I think we all received an email from one of our residents earlier today about all the amazing things we could do if we increase taxes. And I think that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So we've talked about raising taxes. We've talked about keeping taxes the same. Are those great projects? Should we look at those projects? Are they urgent projects? Yes, on all accounts. But I think there's more than one way to go about this, and that's not to kick our residents while they're down after already being hit by 2 hurricanes by increasing taxes. But rather, we could also look at, are there opportunities for us to save 1, 2, 2.5 million somewhere? Or are there other avenues for revenues to increase revenues where it doesn't actually impact our residents? So just off the top of my head, for example, I know we're doing a parking study, right? What is our annual parking revenue currently?
It's approximately $6 million.
Okay, $6 million at roughly $5 an hour for parking. If we increase parking to $6 per hour, that would give us $1.5 million more. And that is without raising the taxes on any of our residents. And we could do the same thing with those funds, which is to put $750,000 of that into those emergency projects, those worthwhile projects, and then the other 50% into a reserve fund. And now we've essentially shifted the burden of the cost onto those who actually create some of the infrastructure issues that we have, rather than punishing our residents with a tax increase. Now, again, I realize we don't have those numbers back yet from the parking study. I'm sure they're coming. But I'm saying that there's more than one way to get that $1.5 million, $2 million, without increasing taxes. So for me, I would prefer, my vote would be to keep it where we are at today and look at, are there any opportunities for us to reduce some of the expenses, and are there opportunities to generate additional revenue that doesn't impact the residents? Now, we clearly also have to do the fee studies and make sure that we're at least breaking even on, stormwater and, reclaimed water, sewer, and all the other ones, because that's where some of our deficiencies have come from in the past. But I think there's an opportunity there to generate those much-needed funds without literally taxing the residents.
And that might come about in the fee study itself, that we have to increase the stormwater or the wastewater. So those will come about naturally, but then that'll offset by the fact that if we're not pulling out of our general fund to cover it, it will help that too. So I would be in agreement on that. I'm totally about, let's see what we can cut and really look at this budget, because I don't want to throw out the dreaded wage and hiring freeze or some of the other things that private enterprises do. But we are in a critical situation here, and so are our residents, and so are our businesses. So we have to be mindful of that in every aspect, and I would challenge the city manager to find ways that where we can save stuff and really put a sharp pencil and basically, hate to say it, but do more with less if we have to be able to save some money to get some of these projects that we need to get done. And as well, creatively, if we can find ways to, increase fees. I was a proponent on the $6 an hour a long time ago for parking. That and impact fees and whatever else we can do. I really think we need to look hard at that. And we'll be doing this millage test again next year, won't we? So we can get through 1 year and do this millage test again and see how well we did.
So I agree with the comments of both the mayor and the commissioner. I just want to clarify one point to make sure that we're not hindering ourselves or somehow limiting our abilities. I believe one of you ladies said that there is a cap if we go back or reduce it. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that, please? Thank you.
So what the city manager was saying is that if we went back in the millage rate, then it resets what our total max could be. So if you're looking at that 2/3 max vote, for example, that's taking it up to 110%. So that would reset or bring that number down or back to that peak, to that place, essentially, is what it would do.
But to
So-
Commissioner Robinson's point, if we were to keep option A, current millage, how is that going to affect us moving forward next year if we have to come back and make a significant adjustment to recoup what we expect to get but may not get?
So what it would likely potentially look like, depending on how the assessed value looks for next year, it would likely look like similar numbers to what we're seeing today based off of that this is our current rate and that rate not changing, essentially.
So what
basically
happens-
Oh, you want to?
Well, I think there's two components to it, which is the first one is whatever your current base millage rate is, right? So let's, easy number, let's say it's 3, right? We can keep it at 3. We can raise it a small percentage with a simple majority vote. The 3-2 would pass it. And we could raise a lot with a supermajority vote of 4-1 or greater.
Okay.
If we went to 2.5, for example, we decided we've got massive surplus, we'll go down to 2.5. Next year, we're limited to a 10% increase or a 25%, I forget what the numbers are. But it's again, you wouldn't be able to go back to 3, you'd be able to go from 2.5 to 2.7 and maybe 2.9. If you go to 2.9 in the following year, you'd be back close to where the 3 was.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my concern obviously is to make sure that we're not somehow hurting ourselves in this.
We would have essentially the same options next year as this year if we keep it at the same rate, because the percentages would be the same. Unless the state of Florida passes a law that changes that.
So, thank you.
So with that, just so that we can move forward to the next step,
There is one more thing. You can go in excess of 110% if you have a unanimous vote.
yep. So just so we can move on to next, do we have consensus on whether we want to keep it, whether we want to go with the rollback rate or a different number? This is just a budget workshop at this point. Yeah, we're not, no public comments. But I'm just saying, so just so we can have consensus and move forward. I know there'll be a vote.
We need to know how to move forward,
Yeah.
so there's no
Yes.
vote, but
The
We need
millage has to
direction.
match the budget, and you have to have.
Exactly.
So in order for them to prepare their budget, they need to know what number you guys want to work with.
For me, the current makes sense as long as we're doing something else. You know, it's why I brought up about the bonds or special assessments, other ways to get these projects done, because, like, that's why I said, even if you went all the way to 2/3, it's not enough, right? So, because it's a 10-year, window. only good enough, I think, from what the city manager was saying, is you have money you can use to leverage, like matching grants, right? Like, I hate to call it, it's our fluff, but it's something that we have that we can use when writing. But also, we've been waiting for, I agree with the fee study, because it's not just parking. I know we're looking at leases, cost of buildings and what, we're using, or, shelters, all the other stuff that's going on in the city that we haven't charged or looked at again. So, which I think we would get the money quicker. If you could say it that way, it'd be faster.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of current millage, so.
Okay, so it seems like we have unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get caught up to where we were. Okay. So these next slides, they're just going to be discussion about a summary of changes since the last workshop and since the last time we met. So starting off, our summary of changes as we are looking at our operating revenue and capital. So first off, we have our EMS Pinellas County contribution updated. So that reflects the most accurate number that we expect to receive from Pinellas County for our EMS services. So that went from 2.9 million up to 3.7 million this year. And then we have an additional 700,000 to replace rescue vehicles 22 and 23. Previously in your budget, you saw that miscellaneous revenue was inclusive of our parking transfer over of about 3.2 million. And so that has been broken out to a separate line item that says transfer for parking, or transfer from parking, into the general fund. And then based on our last meeting, when we're looking at what that discounted, or the amount of residents and businesses that take advantage of the discounted property tax, applying that 4%, so that was updated as well as part of the budget figure. On multimodal revenue, this is updated to reflect that 5 to 10 year scenario, and that's subject to change with the discussions we're having with the county currently. So hopefully we'll have that in a better place when we bring the budget back to you in August. And then we have an updated description around our security and safety project. And then we also have an additional $3 million of revenue for Fire Station 22. So you'll see that paired expense with that additional $3 million as well. And then for our Pinellas County Sheriff's Office contract, we're looking at adding in clarifications of what the responsibility of those officers are doing, and looking at reducing that from 3 to 2, and then reducing that off-duty max from 250,000 to 100,000 for that contract.
Just a quick question on the off-duty. That is a discretionary fund, correct? Okay. So even if we kept it at 250, it would not be used unless it's used.
That's correct. And actually, there's a typo. We're saying 250 to 150. So we looked at the last 2 years, and we've been tracking between 90 and 150. So we just thought we would recommend our actual utilization to free up funds for other things. But it is discretionary, so it would just sit there if we didn't use it.
Okay. But it takes up space in a different column somewhere else.
Correct.
Yep. And so your actual proposal is from 250 to 150, not 2
Correct.
to 100. Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
Did we make any money off of any of the fines? Did we find that out?
We don't.
We make zero.
We do on parking enforcement, though.
No, but
That's
anything
bizarre.
the sheriff collects,
Yes.
speeding,
Yeah.
citations that are criminal in nature, they collect and keep.
Or what about citations on the beach? Would we get those, or would those go to the county?
Those would go to the county.
If there were citations.
If there were.
If there were.
Yeah.
You know,
There were.
there was the one so
There
far
were.
this year. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is looking at our summary of changes as it relates to personnel. The first item there is a phase 2 reorganization of our leadership team with no net budget impact, just new classification. So that is looking at our city library director to city librarian, recreation director to resident services director, and IT director to IT innovation and strategy. also based off of the last storm season. There's a need to have an emergency preparedness specialist. So this is looking at having an upgrade of an admin position to recognize the need of our centralized coordination for emergency preparedness, and also with the new Senate Bill 180. And then in our benefits, I had talked about this at a prior workshop, but you'll see that we're looking at doing a per employee per month, and that is created to better mitigate our budgetary plans as we're looking at our budget. So instead of budgeting off whether or not an employee selects a single plan versus a family, it's a one rate, just based on the fact that we have a head count there. So with that, we were looking at our employee plus change to implement in the budget without an increase to the budget, looking at that cost share, and that is pursuant to the personnel rules and regulations, allowance of subsidies for employee plus plans. Our employees did have a flat benefit renewal, so they're taking care of themselves, and so we thought this was a good opportunity to create a test pilot of this per employee per month and try it for this budget cycle. This also, of course, acts as a good employee retention and recruitment tool as we're looking at those areas of bringing skilled talent into our city to work for those residents. We're still tracking the CPI and the regional market conditions. So this is still sitting with the 2.6 cost of living adjustment for employees. We're waiting for June to come out just to see if that's going to continue. And then the Finance Budget Review Committee had made a recommendation for an increase in compensation for elected officials, and so that has been earmarked in this budget as well. So when we're looking at, this is our very summary level of revenues by fund. I'll take you through a little bit deeper dive of what those look like. This was based on a request of one of our Finance Budget Review Committee members of what is our top 10 non-general fund revenues. So you can see grants, and that is really looking at what we expect to receive back from FEMA, and then some of our other grant options that we're receiving. Wastewater charges for services, those transfers from the general fund, and then our parking facilities, that's looking at just the ones that we have, not inclusive of any of our 50% county share costs. So that's another line item in the budget. And then you can see there we have that penny for Pinellas that we receive for capital projects, our building permit fees, our reclaim service charges as well. So just wanted to provide a picture of what our non-general fund revenues look like. Moving on to looking at our expenditures of summary by fund. So you can see the general fund has the highest at almost 40%. That does include any of those transfers out to the enterprise funds or any of our capital funds as well. Capital fund is the next closest at 25.65, and then our wastewater fund at 19.6. Looking at this slide, you can see that we added in what our total fund balance is. So this is looking at all of our governmental funds. So you can see there that at the end, we're projecting about a $14 million governmental fund ending fund balance for all of those funds combined. In our proprietary, you can see that we have in totality 1.187. Some of these reserves are a bit low for a comfort level for running a city. Our financial advisor is actually behind me, and he's here for our next meeting, but we will be working on bringing back reserve policies for the commission to look at and consider. So moving on to our governmental funds, you can see here any changes that we have in totality looking at the general fund in total. So again, it was recommended that we have about 2 to 3 months of operating expenditures on our fund, which would look at about 6.4. We know that the last 2 storms equated in cost more than that, so that's the question that we'll be working with our financial budget review committee as well as our financial advisor to determine what is a comfortable. Should we plan for the worst case scenario, or should we plan for something in between that or above that? So just some considerations, but right now we're projecting about an $8.7 million fund balance at the end of 2026. This is looking at really where those revenues come from. So almost 50% is coming from our taxes. 16.7 is our next largest bucket for miscellaneous revenue, and then we have our charges for services, intergovernmental, and so that's just looking at where we receive those. So I mentioned earlier about what has changed in here. So that's our ad valorem tax. That is our EMS county contribution that we expect to receive on capital as well as operating for those areas. And so you can see that that total revenue we expect to receive is about $37.5 million in our general fund. Looking at our expenditures, so what makes up the overall general fund, personnel is about 27%, operating expenditures is 29, and then that other uses at 27.93 is inclusive of those transfers out for our enterprise or proprietary funds and any capital projects. This is looking at the general fund and what our biggest services that exist within the general fund. So our public safety makes up the largest portion of that, aside from non-departmental, which is where all of those transfers out are occurring, and then followed by public services. So again, I had mentioned that there is funding earmarked for elected official salaries. Community development, I have this slide listed on here as we had a building clerk that was listed as part of our community development and planning, but actually needed to be in the building fund. So that was a shift there and why you're seeing it going from 5.1 down to 4.1. So that was a change. I'd already discussed about the leadership changes for IT, but just wanted to show that here. When we're looking at law enforcement.
I have a question on
Yeah.
IT. IT is budgeted, it's currently at 189, 183 actual, but okay, and the budget is 460. Are we missing people in the department? Or is that, that was actual as we beefed up in 2025? Personnel, salaries and wages? Went from the actual in 2024 from 183 to 460? Am I reading that wrong?
You're not reading that wrong. So the 2024 actual, yes, has 183,000, and then the 2025 budget has 460,000.
And our actual for this year is 132.
Yes,
Okay.
as of the last time that we.
So are we missing people in that we're just budgeting for them, or?
Historically, IT was part of finance, and so you'll see that with IT and HR, where we have some areas where the numbers look different.
Yeah, it looks different.
But we can certainly take a deeper dive, and I can follow up with you on that specifically. Law enforcement, I had talked about the changes in that budgetary figure here. And fire and EMS, just wanted to reflect and show that total charges for services and revenues that we're expecting to receive again from the county. So I'll kind of breeze through some of these slides there. In public services, that is where we would be looking to house the emergency preparedness coordinator, and so just wanted to show that position reclassification on here. And then library department, that was an area where we had a change from library director to city librarian. Recreation and aquatics, again, this is looking at the resident services director from recreation director. And then in our non-departmental, these are all of our revenues that aren't tied specifically to a department or to a division within the general fund. So these are what we would consider sort of our non-departmental, or the areas that are shared throughout our general fund budget. And then in our building fund, I had mentioned that classification with the building clerk position, so that is what is being reflected here. In our multimodal fund, in previous workshops, we had shown kind of a full cost of what that impact fee would look like. This is very much a placeholder right now of what could potentially be what we're looking at for 2026. It's very similar to 2025, and we'll come back once those discussions with the county have been more finalized.
Could I ask a question? Because I see it comes up a lot, the miscellaneous revenue, and then there's other revenues. Like, what's the difference between a miscellaneous revenue and other revenue? Or what are they? Because they're not small amounts.
So miscellaneous revenue is, here, I'll give you the example right here. So you can see on miscellaneous revenue, there's actually a way to see what object codes are tied to what when you're looking at that last part, the 6-digit number. So you have your first.
On 101, I think you had one there on your prior slide.
So
There you
this
go.
one actually will show you, let me show you. So if we're looking
There it is.
here and you see how 36 starts with miscellaneous revenue, you can follow that on the next slide by looking at that last piece of the object code under investment income that has the 361100 at the end. So those are pairing together,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So if you ever want to see how are these rolling up, then you can just look at what that beginning number is as part of that account string.
Okay. So like you don't have to go all the way back, but like on page 12, where it had the whole summary, because it was like $3.5 million in miscellaneous revenues. Then I know it'd be hard, but it's basically everything forward under there is split up. Like if I were to add it, I would see, okay.
Yeah, so if you look at these slides that have the detailed information, not the rolled up information, then you can see exactly what is flowing up through that number based on that 2 digits within that
And is it
revenue.
miscellaneous just because it changes all the time? Like, why not just call it with the last?
So this year we switched to the unified accounting standards that the state of Florida utilizes, and that is for audit purposes. So when anytime we have a new auditor or our auditors are working with us, they're able to look at that unified accounting system because it's something that the state of Florida utilizes. And so for them, they're able to say, and they actually dictate based off of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, what that should look like. So they're able to tie and say, we should be able to see this GASB pronouncement within this account code. So it's a bit of an accounting mechanism that we're utilizing. I understand sometimes it doesn't feel the most transparent, but we did make that switch this year to be a more unified city by following that.
So the more general description is the one that we're following.
We're following the unified accounting system for the state of Florida.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so then looking at our capital fund, this is where you can see the additional $3 million that under other sources from our revenue that we expect to have for the Fire Station 22. And again, under our buildings, you can see that increased by that same $3 million amount. So this is our funded department division, our funded positions by department that you had previously seen. And so the total that we were looking at there was 159.6 total positions for the St. Pete Beach.
And where do we start 25 at? Or 24?
I have that.
Because we added a few people.
Where did we start 24 at?
Or 25, or
I can show you.
Pre-hurricane.
I have in here what we have either added to or adopted for 2025. I would have to go back and get you what was adopted for 25 last year.
because we did not have 16 people in the building department last.
Correct.
Mm.
Yes,
Yeah.
and some of those are a limited duration
Sure.
positions. But yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so if I can point that out, that the reason I'm pointing it out is because we actually, based on what our budget was versus what we actually are projecting to receive by the end of the year, we're short $1.5 million because of the decrease in the property values because of the hurricane. But we also added at least 15 people in the building department. And so we are actually doing significantly more with significantly less. I'm not sure that we could have done that a year or two ago. So, thank you.
So then, looking at our capital improvement plan, I had highlighted the changes. So to the citywide safety and security system, the description for that has been updated. And then the Fire Station 22 demolition and construction has also been updated. Previously, it was at that $1.5 million. Now it has an additional $3 million in it. So there is our updated description for that citywide camera and security system. And then you can see here what we're showing for Fire Station 22 demolition and construction. Okay, here's the slide that I was looking for. I had this in here twice, and I thought I had corrected that from the Finance Budget Review Committee, so my apologies. But that is showing where we were coming from. Any positions that we added in 2025, to the mayor's point, we did add at least 7 limited durations positions in 2025. And then at our next meeting, we'll be looking at the tentative budget book and summary of changes. So we'll take that current millage rate, and which is already what's in here. But what the commission will see at that next meeting is any of our 2025 capital projects that need to be reappropriated for completion. So any of those projects that are straddling 2 fiscal years will be added into that capital improvement plan. That'll be one of the larger changes. And then we're still waiting with our work comp and property casualty partners to determine how much and what our percentage renewal is going to be on that. Right now, we still have it in here at the worst case scenario of 27%. We expect to have that go down, and we are working with them to determine, can we increase the deductible? What are our options here so that we don't have to absorb such a large increase. But those are just kind of a spoiler alert of what we're looking for in our next budget workshop meeting. So with that, any questions?
Commissioner Mario?
So it's been mentioned in the last couple of budget workshops, and we've never really addressed it, which is the recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee to raise the wages for the commission. And I just wanted to say I'm not in favor of that. None of us are being paid what we're worth. Doubling it is still not going to pay us what we're worth. None of us do it for the money. We're asking the city to do a lot with not much. And I personally wouldn't feel right being paid more money. I mean, the small amount that it is, I'm sure that money can be spent better somewhere else.
And I echo those comments. I was actually going to ask and just make sure that we stay within bounds. I know we can't vote on it once it moves forward, so I do think it is important to address it now. And I understand the noble intent in that, but I have to say that this is not the year to be increasing commissioners' salaries or pay. So thank you.
Is it showing right now as an increase on that, or just, is that coming? 'Cause I didn't.
It would require a vote and a discussion, just like anything else.
The vote would be by the public, correct? I mean, we're not,
It would, it's an
we
ordinance.
can vote on ourselves?
It would have to be a vote of the people. It would be a referendum on the next ballot.
Thank you.
So it's not reflective right now, right? We're just saying that it's been in discussion, but it's not on our budget.
In
It's
the
earmarked.
event that this commission or that it was placed on the ballot, there is a earmarked holdover within the budget currently.
Gotcha.
It also wouldn't take effect until the next election cycle. So you couldn't really vote on it for yourself.
No, but it's absolutely up to the people. It's not within the commission, and you would have to comment on that, but.
Yeah, I think the referendum is required. And sometimes they vote for them, sometimes they don't.
And what's the vote of the commission to put it on the ballot?
We would do an ordinance placing a referendum on the ballot. It says with ballot question, there are 15 words, the ballot measure, 75 words. Should this be adopted, yes or no? And that would be also picking the election date, specifying the date that it would be voted upon.
And I'm sorry, it wouldn't be on the next election for the special election. It would have to probably wait until the March 2027 election or 2026 election.
You have to coordinate with the supervisor of elections.
Speaking of voting, I think today we identified a potential just real shortfall in this process, right? Because we made a decision on whether to keep the millage rate without having public comment and without an actual vote. And I realized that, and so the problem is we have to make a decision so that you can work on the budget, and then all of this will come back for a vote in September. But in September, it'll be too late to undo the decision from today. And so maybe what would be great for next year is that we add a step in here where the commission actually has, we could have that meeting right now, just like this today. And then at the next meeting at 6 p.m., we could have we can have the discussion, the public comment, and then the vote, well in advance of the budget that comes out, so that we can so that the commission actually has it on the record what the vote was, and so the public has an opportunity to bring forth public comment.
I will work with,
We have a tentative budget hearing and then a
Mhm.
final budget hearing, and we'll look at the dates that they fall
So
within.
I'm talking just about the millage rate, just
Yeah.
for the millage rate.
I want to, yeah, definitely check into it. We followed the process from last year, but that
I
might
understand.
have just been flawed and,
Might be an improvement, so.
yeah.
Well, it's-
So let me look and see
It's
how. we
certainly,
do
it just really brings up a big flaw to me, because we should be able to hear from people. And once we make this decision, if we don't have an opportunity to change it, we can't go up. We can go down, but we couldn't go up in the future.
Correct.
Yeah.
If we don't have direction soon enough, you would be locked into current or a reduction for September.
Yep.
Okay, noted, and we will make that modification to the process next year.
Right. Okay, any other questions for Devin or the city manager? If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. We'll see you at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.